I bet most of you, when you sit down for dinner, you probably trust what you're eating is safe. And why wouldn't you, right? But what if I told you that the very agency responsible for protecting our food supply might not be protecting you at all? Welcome to the world of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, the government body responsible for ensuring our food is safe to eat, or at least that's what they want you to think. Founded in 1906 after the Pure Food and Drug Act, the FDA was originally created to protect people from dangerous products. But as big corporations grew, so did the agency's ties to these industries. Over time, it became clear that the FDA wasn't just about public health, it was about profit and power. Today, they regulate everything from food to pharmaceuticals, yet they have approved thousands of chemicals, additives, and preservatives that we consume every day, many of which have been linked to serious health problems. And the FDA isn't alone. There's also the Codex Alimentarius Commission, or CAC, which was established in the early 1960s under the UN to create international food standards. Sounds good on paper, right? Well, these standards are heavily influenced by the same corporate interests that profit from keeping the truth hidden. How did we let these institutions become gatekeepers of what's safe to consume? Let's dig a little deeper into that rabbit hole. It's funny, isn't it? The agencies that are supposed to protect us from harmful substances seem to be allowing more and more of them into our food supply. It's almost like trusting the fox to guard the henhouse. And speaking of henhouses, let's talk about how these toxins made their way onto your dinner plate in the first place. All right, first off, let's get one thing straight. The food you eat today isn't the same as what your grandparents grew up on. Over the past century, we've allowed our food system to become a chemical cocktail of pesticides, GMOs, preservatives, and toxic seed oils. It all started in the mid 20th century, during the so-called Green Revolution, when chemical companies began developing synthetic pesticides and genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, under the guise of increasing crop yields to end world hunger. But here's the kicker. These chemicals weren't tested for long-term safety. The Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, and the FDA decided that small doses were safe for human consumption. But were they really? Today, pesticides like glyphosate, a known carcinogen, are sprayed on nearly all of the crops, and genetically modified foods are engineered to resist these same chemicals. Convenient, right? But what's the real cost of consuming these chemicals over time? Research has shown that long-term exposure to synthetic chemicals in our food supply can have devastating effects on human health, including the breakdown of DNA. This kind of genetic damage isn't something you'll see immediately, but over time, it can manifest in deadly ways. According to a 2015 study published in The Lancet Oncology, glyphosate was classified as a probable human carcinogen. Dr. Christopher Porter, who contributed to the report, stated, "There is sufficient evidence to suggest that glyphosate can damage DNA, which may ultimately lead to cancer." The same chemical is still widely used in the US, despite mounting evidence of its dangers, and it doesn't stop with glyphosate. Artificial food dyes, which are used to make processed foods more visually appealing, have been linked to conditions like ADHD. According to an '07 study published by the British Medical Journal, certain artificial colorings such as red 40 and yellow number 5 are associated with increased hyperactivity in children. Dr. Jim Stevenson, who led the study, noted, "We found significant association between artificial food colorings and hyperactive behavior in children, suggesting a need for stricter regulations on these additives." Yet, despite this research, the FDA still allows these dyes to be used in countless food products marketed to children. And then there's preservatives, like BHA and BHT, which are used to prevent fats from spoiling in processed foods. While these substances help extend shelf life, they may also increase the risk of certain cancers. A report from the National Institute of Health found that high doses of BHA and BHT cause cancer in lab animals, though the FDA continues to classify them as generally recognized as safe. The problem is that safe doesn't account for the cumulative impact of these chemicals over a lifetime of consumption. They say everything in moderation, but have you ever noticed how the things that we're told to eat in moderation end up in everything? Funny how that works. Now let's talk about what happens when people fight back, because not everyone is okay with being slowly poisoned. Over the years, activists and health advocates have tried to stand up against the toxic food system. They've taken companies and government agencies to court, demanding action against the chemicals lurking in our food. But guess what? The legal system's rigged. Take the case of Monsanto and glyphosate. In 2018, a groundskeeper named Dwayne Johnson won a landmark lawsuit against Monsanto after claiming that their weed killer Roundup, which contains glyphosate, causes terminal cancer. He was awarded $289 million, but Monsanto, now owned by Bayer, continues to sell the product. Why? Because the government has yet to take significant action to ban glyphosate, even though its dangers have been proven in court. It's like the system allows these chemicals to stay on shelves as long as the profits keep flowing. And then there's the fight against BPA, a chemical used in plastic food packaging that has been linked to hormone disruption. In 2012, after years of pressure, the FDA banned BPA in baby bottles, but it's widely used in other food containers. It's a case of too little, too late. These lawsuits are only the tip of the iceberg. Time and time again, courts have ruled in favor of consumers, proving that these chemicals are dangerous. But do these rulings ever translate into real change? Not as often as you hope. The government seems content with settling these cases and issuing fines, while the real poison stays on your plate. It's funny how billion-dollar corporations can just shrug off a lawsuit. These cases rarely result in criminal penalties. If you wanted to be a drug dealer, for example, and import heroin on a large scale, and you get arrested, you're going to jail and guaranteed for a while. But if you can make $80 billion to poison people a different way, and then get a slap on the wrist and some fines, then why wouldn't you do food instead of drugs? If there was basically no criminal downside to it. So if we don't take it seriously, why should the perpetrators take it seriously? In foresight, some countries are starting to take something seriously. But in the United States, we're consuming foods every day that are considered too dangerous to be sold in other parts of the world. That's right. The same products you pick up at your local grocery store are banned in countries like France, the UK, and Japan. Take artificial food dyes, for example. Those bright colors that make your favorite candies and snacks look so appealing. Dyes, again, like Red 40 and Yellow Number 5, are banned in Europe because they've been linked to hyperactivity in children and other health issues. But here in the US, they're still widely used. And then there's RBGH, a synthetic hormone injected into cows to increase milk production. It's banned in Canada, Japan, Australia, and the EU due to its link to increased cancer risks. But here in America, it's in your milk, your cheese, and your yogurt, despite massive protests and studies showing its harmful effects. Even brominated vegetable oil, or BVO, which is used in some sodas to stabilize flavor, has been banned in over 100 countries. But it's still allowed here. Why? Because the FDA claims that these substances are safe in moderation. Here we go again with the moderation. The truth is, it's not about protecting public health. It's about protecting corporate profits. It's wild, right? If other governments ban these foods, why isn't ours? But wait, it gets even more twisted. Let's talk about the fake organic scam that's fueling the market today. Organic food is supposed to be the safer, healthier alternative, right? You pay more because you think you're avoiding harmful pesticides, synthetic chemicals, and GMOs. But what if I told you that much of the organic food you buy isn't as clean as you think? The USDA organic label has become a billion-dollar industry, but not everything that carries this label is truly organic. Loopholes in the National Organic Program allow large corporations to exploit the system by using synthetic pesticides and even genetically modified ingredients in products labeled as organic. And guess who regulates this? The same government agencies that regulate the standard food supply. In fact, a 2018 investigation revealed that some farmers certified as organic were found to be using chemical fertilizers and pesticides. But because these operations are so large and profitable, they manage to keep their organic status. As long as the USDA gets a cut, everything's cool, right? It's just another example of how the government prioritizes corporate profits over public health. And even when the food is truly organic, the government still allows other toxic substances into the processing stages. Organic doesn't necessarily mean safe, especially when you consider that these foods are still being packaged in plastic containers containing BPA or lined with toxic coatings. The illusion of safety is just that, an illusion. At the end of the day, whether it's conventional or organic, it's all the same wizard controlling Oz, and you're the one paying the price, both at the register and with your health. So there you have it. Whether it's chemicals, fake organics, or banned foods, it's becoming clear that the government isn't too concerned with what we're putting in our bodies. But hey, it's all fine in moderation, right? Sure, until you realize that moderation isn't everything you eat. It's almost like they want to keep us just healthy enough to work, but sick enough to keep spending on the system they control. Makes you think, doesn't it? Remember, the truth? It's never far away. It's just waiting for those bold enough to question everything.